Welcome to the Drift and Ramble podcast. I'm Steve Blizin. Each episode will explore true stories and American legends. From the pages of history and a few stories handed down over the years, we'll look at the people, places, and events that helped shape a nation. Stories of survival, notable frontier men and women, explorers who struck it rich, and the outlaws that stole it from them. There'll be studies of saloon girls, swindlers, banditry, and bad men, profiles of lawmen and American Indians, and the good and evil that existed between them. We'll amble through the past. We'll delve into the folklore of the times and maybe even uncover a ghost story or two. So, saddle up or settle in for the Drift and Ramble podcast. This is episode 26. Outlaws come in all shapes and sizes, and no matter how hard Mama tried, some folks just can't seem to walk the straight and narrow. If you're a regular listener to this show, you've heard about outlaw men like Big Nose George and shady ladies like Big Nose Kate. You know that some of the first stagecoach robbers were Tom Bell and Rattlesnake Dick. But today, we'll learn about one of the few women known to take part in robbing a stagecoach. And this one was one of the last. She was a woman with a lust for cards, a penchant for pants, and a soft spot for bad boys. Her name was Pearl Hart, and though all the mystery that swirls around her is impossible to unravel, the story begins in a small village in Ontario, Canada. She is born Pearl Taylor in 1871. Her parents are wealthy and deeply religious. They want to provide their daughter with the best of everything, including her education. So, they send her off to boarding school. But while away from her parents' watchful eyes, the teenage Taylor becomes infatuated with a rough-and-tumble young gambler named Frederick Hart. At age 16, Pearl and Fred elope, but the marriage doesn't last. Her husband, Hart, is described as a rake, a libertine, a drunkard, and a card shark. After discovering the man is abusive, Pearl Hart returns home to live with her mother. But just like how moths are attracted to flames, sometimes the passion of an ill-fated romance is just too hard to resist. The two Harts eventually reconcile, and the pattern of abusive behavior cycles through several rotations. Along the way, Pearl gives birth to a boy and then a girl. But considering her unstable home environment, she sends the kids to live with her mother, who is now living in Ohio. In 1893, the two Harts travel to Chicago and attend the World's Fair. Fred lands a job as a carnival barker, leaving Pearl with plenty of time to stroll the grounds and enjoy the sights, sounds, and wonders of the White City.
Step right up, folks. That's right. Gather round, gather round. Folks, maybe you've seen some amazing sights like the moving sidewalk or them fancy motion pictures.
Hey, Fred. Psst, yoo-hoo.
Or maybe you've ogled the barely clad beauties who dance the hoochie coochie. But today, right here, right now, you're going to have a chance to experience something remarkable, something truly spectacular. In fact, it just earned its Blue Ribbon Prize right here at this World's Fair. Formerly known as Best Select, ladies and gentlemen, behold, Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer.
Fred, I'm just going to go walk around the fairground some.
All right, Pearl. All right. You just go on ahead then. Can't you see I'm working here?
Among the many attractions along the Midway is a giant rotating wheel built by George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. At 264 feet high, and with 36 independently swinging cars, the massive moving construct could accommodate up to 40 people at a time. The Ferris wheel is an international hit, and it so inspires attendee George C. Tillieu, he would later go on to create America's first dedicated amusement park at Coney Island, New York. But while Pearl's husband yells to the crowd about the attractions at the fair, Pearl is left to her own devices. William Frederick Buffalo Bill Cody had attempted to make his Wild West show part of the World's Fair. His show had already been an international success, even holding an exclusive performance for the Queen of England. But when the fair committee rejected Buffalo Bill's proposal to join the World's Fair, Bill was undaunted. He simply secured land nearby the fairgrounds and set up his show in Chicago anyway. Pearl Hart attended and quickly became enchanted by the lure of the Old West. Here, she saw strong women performing all kinds of daring feats that only men were thought to do. She saw the famous Annie Oakley, and Hart became enamored. She may have also attended the Women's Pavilion at the fair and heard from many women activists, including the poet Julia Ward Howe. Hart was so inspired that when the World's Fair ended, she left Chicago and her dirtbag husband, possibly in the company of a piano player named Dan Bandman. Pearl likes the bad boys, and she's enthralled by strong women and the portrayals of life on the frontier. She and Dan moved to Phoenix, Arizona, where he works in dance halls and she works as a cook and may have even been a singer for a time. Along the way, she develops a fondness for cigars, liquor, and morphine. But when Dan drifts off to fight in the Spanish-American War, Pearl, the damsel turned demimonde, moves off to Globe, Arizona, and hooks up with yet another bad hombre. This one's from Germany, and his name is Joe Boot. Boot has a mining claim, and the two work day and night to try to make a living, but it doesn't yield any gold. Some say that's when Pearl pitched a tent, called it a brothel, and even hired another girl to work with her. Suddenly, her tent brothel business is booming.
All right, fellas, which one of you's next? Ooh, hold on a second. Hey, Missy.
Who, me?
Yes, you. You interested in helping me out with my successful tent brothel?
Well, I don't know. I'm ever so modest, and my husband is just so strict. I just...
Well, don't keep me guessing. You're either in or you're out. I got a line of miners a mile long here, and I will split the profits with you 50-50.
50-50? Huh. That is a long line over there. I guess I better get started. Next!
Business is great. That is, until the mine closes down. Since Joe Boot is mostly unsuccessful as a miner, he figures there's gotta be a way to get hold of gold that doesn't require a pickaxe and a shovel. Finally, he convinces Pearl to lure men up to her hotel room, where the two freshly minted bandits can relieve them of their money.
Well, hey there, handsome. You sure got yourself a lot of coins. How about you bring a handful up to my room? I think we can work out a trade. You come on up and see me.
Why, yes, ma'am. I ain't seen a woman since Flagstaff, and she was just my grandma.
Well, I just need a minute to get all gussied up for you. Give me a couple minutes and come up to room number 4 at the end of the hall. My name's Pearl, by the way.
Yes, ma'am, Miss Pearl.
Joe, get yourself hidden. There's a live one coming up them stairs any minute.
Knock, knock, Miss Pearl. I sure hope you ain't decent.
Why, come on in here, sugar, and feast your eyes on little old Pearl.
Here, quick, help me drag him behind the bed.
This here's the sheriff. What's all the commotion in there? Sounds like somebody's getting pistol whipped or something.
Oh, everything's fine, Sheriff. Just fine. Had me a romp in the hay with old Pearl here, and I just dropped my boot whilst I was getting dressed.
Hi, Sheriff. You want to get a little bit before I get myself all dressed again?
Pearl, what are you doing? Don't invite that man in here.
No thank you kindly, Miss Pearl. I'm still itching from the last time we had relations.
Well, you know where I am if you change your mind, Sheriff.
The ruse is lucrative but dangerous. The couple nearly gets caught on multiple occasions. So, they decide they need another way to try to get rich.
Joe, you got any bright ideas on how we can get some dang money?
Robbing them gentlemen callers of yours seemed pretty good to me.
Oh yeah, but it's too dangerous. The sheriff seems to spend as much time in this brothel as he does at the jailhouse.
I reckon I know what you mean. Let me think on it. Hey, what about that stagecoach that runs from Globe to Florence? That ain't been robbed in years.
Hey, that's not a bad idea. Here, take these scissors and cut my hair real short. And let me wear a pair of your old breeches. Folks will think I'm one of the boys.
Here's a flannel shirt of mine, and some suspenders. Hey, well, I'll be. You make a pretty fine-looking feller there, mister. All right, partner, let's go meet that stagecoach.
Pearl Hart and her bandit companion Joe Boot held up the stage and stole 2 guns and a whopping $421 in cash from the passengers. With her hair cut short and dressed in men's clothing, Hart proves she has a heart after all. She felt so bad for the people she'd just robbed that she gave them each back $1 so they could get something to eat in Florence. Hart had a .38 revolver, while Boot carried a Colt .45, which he trained on the driver during the robbery, while Pearl collected all of their loot.
We came to a bend in the road, which was a most favorable spot for our undertaking. We halted and listened till we heard the stage. Joe drew up a .45 and said, "Throw up your hands." I drew my little .38. While he kept the people covered, he ordered them out of the stage. They were a badly scared outfit. I learned how easy a job of this kind could be done. Joe told me to search the passengers for arms. I carefully went through them all. They had no pistols. Joe motioned towards the stage, so I advanced and searched it. The brave passengers had left 2 of their guns behind them when ordered out of the stage. Really, I can't see why men carry revolvers because they almost invariably give them up at the very time they were meant to be used. I gave Joe the .44 and kept the .45 for myself. Joe told me to search the passengers for money. I did so, and on the fella who was shaking the worst, I found $390. This fella was trembling so I could hardly get my hands in his pockets. The other fella, a sort of dude with his hair parted in the middle, tried to tell me how much he needed the money, but he yielded $36 a dime and 2 nickels. Then I searched the remaining passenger, a Chinaman. He was nearer my side and I just scared him to death. His clothes enabled me to go through them quickly. I only got $5, however. The stage driver had a few dollars, but after council of war, we decided not to rob him. Then we gave each of the others a charitable contribution of $1 each. Joe told them to move on and not to look back.
Since this route was one of the last of the territory near the turn of the century, and this particular one hadn't been robbed in several years, the stagecoach didn't even have someone riding shotgun, a common practice for stagecoaches at the height of the Old West. After the 2 bandits made their getaway, the driver unhitched one of the horses and headed back to town to alert the sheriff. Some say that Hart and Boot tried to elude their pursuers by riding in circles. Others say the 2 greenhorn stagecoach robbers simply got lost. Whatever they did, they wound up getting caught by the sheriff and his men. Pearl tells us how they tried to get away.
Joe and I rode slowly up the road, planning our future movements. This undertaking, to throw the officers off track, was the most hazardous, and as I look back upon that wild ride, that effort to escape the consequences of our bloodless crime, I marvel that we did not lose our lives.
Pearl and Joe rode through the rough terrain, hoping the law would not come after them. As darkness fell, they approached the town of Riverside. Hearing all of the activity of wagons and men on horseback from the nearby town made them nervous. So the 2 tied off their horses and scrambled up a steep hill full of caves to look for one to hide in.
We kept quiet until the sound ceased, and then crawled and walked up the side of a big sandstone hill, where there were many small caves or holes of a circular shape, not much larger than a man's body. Upon reaching this spot of safety, we found it to be the home of wild musk hogs, which abound in this locality. Oh, these hogs will fight if they have to. However, our peril was so great that we could not hesitate about other chances, and we selected a hole into which we could crawl. Joe went in and I followed. Of course, we had to look out for rattlesnakes too, which made our entrance very slow. After we crawled about 20 feet, Joe stopped, saying he could see 2 shining eyes ahead and was going to take a shot. I must confess I felt very creepy, but we were between the devil and the deep blue sea. And I listened to hear Joe, from his point of view, tell me of his success. The animal was shot and killed and proved to be a big musk hog. We soon found the powder smoke annoying, and as we could not turn around, we backed to near the entrance for fresh air. Oh, we stayed there all day, and what a long day it was.
But clearly, the two new bandits didn't hide themselves very well. Only a couple of days later, while camped near the town of Benson, the two lovebirds awoke to become two jailbirds, with rifle barrels pointed in their faces. The sheriff's posse took the two to Benson and eventually on to Florence. While Hart is in jail, she's treated like a celebrity. The Bandit Queen signs autographs, poses for photographs, and entertains a throng of writers and reporters. But this lawless lady isn't quite ready to end her illustrious crime wave. She escapes her cell on October 12, 1899, and she and her accomplice, a man named Ed Hogan, head for the hills. Once again, hiding doesn't prove to be Pearl's forte. She's caught, captured, and returned to jail. She stands trial in November of 1899. During the trial, Pearl would famously exclaim,
I shall not consent to be tried under a law in which my sex had no voice in making.
Did this feminist defense decree work in her favor? Perhaps, but there may have been some other factors at play too. During her defense, Pearl's attorney claimed she was only trying to get money to send home to her poor old dear mother. And of course, Pearl had her natural charms at work. Even though she confessed to the crime during the trial, she was acquitted. Judge Fletcher Doane exploded. He claimed that Pearl had manipulated the jury by flirting and bending them to her will. So the angry judge replaced the jury and retried Pearl for unlawfully carrying a gun. This time, Pearl was not so lucky, and he sentenced her to 5 years at the Yuma Territorial Prison. Her partner, Joe Boot, got a 30-year sentence in a separate trial. He was also sent to Yuma Prison, but Joe was able to escape in 1901. Joe Boot was never heard from again. Pearl Hart, the Bandit Queen, returned to some level of celebrity while in jail. Again, she posed for pictures and even enjoyed an especially large cell to allow her to play host to the press and entertain admirers. Of those, she allegedly had plenty. One even sent her a bobcat kitten as a gift, and Pearl was even photographed with the wild cat. And for every version of Pearl's story that was published in the press, Pearl's true narrative may never be known. In the story of her own life that Pearl would write from a prison cell, she claimed it was her that made Joe do the crime. She had only done it to get money so she could travel back to see her dying mother for one final time, she said. Do we believe her? She already broke out of jail once prior to her trial. She conveniently omits any drug use, alcohol abuse, or prostitution when describing her own past, and when she was finally released from jail, that seemed to be under suspicious circumstances as well. After serving barely 2 years in prison, in 1902, Hart received a pardon from Governor Alexander Brody. While the reason for this pardon is unclear, it was issued on the provision that Hart was to leave the territory. Hart was quietly released and provided with a train ticket to Kansas City, Missouri. One story that circulated was that Hart claimed she was needed in Kansas City to play the lead in a play written by her sister about her life of crime. But in 1964, following the death of potentially all those involved, a new story began to circulate about Pearl's early release. That story would have caused a bit of embarrassment to the prison.
Why, hello, Mr. Prison Warden. So kind of you to let me visit you today.
What is it this time, Pearl? You know this prison does not run at your beck and call.
Aw, Warden, you might want to think about getting me a pardon. See, one of your guards, well, I guess he got sweet on me, and pretty soon we was, well, you know. Anyway, now I'm with child, and what with all these photographers and reporters coming by, I reckon they'll have a lot of questions about how a girl got pregnant while inside a state prison.
Pearl, you've hoodwinked, connived, and flooded your way into this prison, and I'll be damned if that's the way you plan to get out. Let me get word to the governor, and I'll let you know what he says.
There is no evidence that Hart ever had a third child. So, if this rumor is true, it may indicate a successful ploy on Hart's part. From here, Hart's trail meanders off into a thicket of rumors and lies. It's hard to know just exactly what parts are true. Some say she starred in a short-lived show about her life of crime. Others say she changed her name and went to work for Buffalo Bill for a time. But the days of the Old West were over forever. No matter how much Pearl longed for the romance of that bygone era, when it was gone, it was gone. In 1904, Pearl found herself back in trouble with the law again. She was running a cigar store in Kansas City when she was arrested for receiving stolen property. But Pearl's prison days were over, and she was once again acquitted of the charges. After that, Pearl's trail grows cold. One popular story has her returning to the jail in Tucson 25 years after her original arrest. Another has her returning to the courthouse in Florence and telling the clerk,
Why, this old place hasn't changed one bit.
Ma'am, what's your name?
Pearl, son. Pearl Hart, the Lady Bandit.
In 1940, a census taker claimed he had discovered her living under a different name. And a few believe she married, moved on, and lived a quiet life. And still others claimed that she returned to Globe, Arizona, and lived out the rest of her days until her death, December 30th, 1955. If Pearl's famous feminist courtroom outcry was an indication of her activism as a suffragist, we may never be sure. But the fact that she was inspired by strong women of the West is undoubted. By the turn of the century, strong-willed Western women had secured the right to vote in Iowa and Utah, and by 1910, many Western states joined in securing this right for women. By 1920, women had the right to vote across every state in the Union. Did Pearl Hart play a role in swaying the country? No, but she probably smiled, knowing that women were finally getting the chance to have their say. Strong-willed women are emblematic of the West, and whether their hands hold ropes, reins, ballots, or pens, they moved this country forward. In Pearl's version of her own life story, she spoke about the abuses she suffered by her first husband. She told a tale of teenage infatuation, a failed marriage, and the struggle to make ends meet. She also told how she robbed the stagecoach she was so famous for.
I was good-looking, desperate, discouraged, and ready for anything that might come along.
Whether Pearl was put upon, or a wild and willing participant in her crazy life of crime, we may never know. But what we do know is that Pearl Hart became the very image of the thing she idolized most. A strong Western woman who could do as well as any man in a world that was once dominated by men. Victim of circumstance or master manipulator, Pearl Hart remains a legend of the American West. Many resources were used in researching this episode. Although every effort has been made to provide fact, some discrepancies may arise. I'd like to acknowledge the following resources: Kathy Weiser Alexander and legendsofamerica.com. Claudette Simpson and The Courier, December 18, 1981. Women of the West, an essay by Virginia Scharf for History Now and the Gilder Lehrman Institute. Author and historian Jan Mackle Collins. an Arizona episode, Cosmopolitan Magazine, issue 27, 1899. The New York Times, History.net, Wikipedia.org. Before I tell you what's coming up on the next Drift and Ramble podcast, I need to say thank you to a lot of folks, including Rhiannon and Greg McAfee, for being part of this episode. Their show, Rex Riveter, Private Eye, is a fictional full-cast audio drama set in 1950s Los Angeles. It's exceptionally well done, and you've got to check it out. That's Rex Riveter, Private Eye. And thanks to Austin Beach and the folks at Audio Oblivious Productions, who you've heard on nearly every episode of this show. They have their own show called Winnebago Warrior, The Tale of John Waynaby, which is a fiction comedy show that'll make you laugh. That's Winnebago Warrior, The Tale of John Waynaby. I also want to say thanks to you. You're the reason I do this show, and I really appreciate having you along for the ride. Thank you for being a listener. If you're looking for a complete cast list, resource links, and show notes, you can find them all at patreon.com/driftandramble. That's patreon.com/driftandramble. There's no cost or obligation, and no salesman will call, so head on over and grab all you can for free, and please consider supporting our show while you're there. There's been a lot of buzz about the Fate Crafters Network lately, and the reason is a great lineup of shows. Fate Crafters is a network of independent, individually produced audio drama content from some incredibly talented people. Shows like Lake Clarity, The Box, and Sable. Sable is a serialized audio drama about a world that isn't what it seems. In fact, it's about an infinite amount of worlds that aren't as they seem. Angry gods, weird, unexplainable events. All this and more can be found in the worlds of Sable. Sable is a single-narrator horror podcast by Lane Lloyd. What starts off as a simple case of small-town scares quickly escalates to a ticking clock, a battle between gods, and the ever-disappearing line between reality and fiction. Check out Sable on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcatcher. And be sure to follow Lane on Twitter @SablePod and on Facebook.com/SableNarrator. The Drift and Ramble podcast is proud to be part of Fate Crafters Network, and you can check out the entire lineup of quality shows at fatecrafters.net. Coming up next on the Drift and Ramble podcast is the story of one of my favorite outlaws. He was a fearsome figure that eluded Wells Fargo detectives for 8 years. He was an intellectual outlaw, an expert woodsman and tracker, a Civil War veteran, and some say, a formidable poet. It's the story of Black Bart, the poet, on the next Drift and Ramble podcast. This story will be a 2-part series featuring a terrific cast of experienced voice actors and brand new talent from across the globe. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until we meet again, I'm Steve Blizin. See you on the next edition of the Drift and Ramble podcast.
The Drift and Ramble podcast is a Clear Voice Media production, hosted and produced by Steve Blizin, with segment research and voice acting by Cheryl Blizin. Additional contributions and content have been made possible by support from individuals dedicated to the art and science of storytelling and exploring the still fertile promise of the American West. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
There goes old Sally Maples. She's so dumb she couldn't teach a hen to cluck. Her husband ain't so bright neither. He's as dull as dishwater. If all his brains was dynamite, there wouldn't be enough to blow his nose. He is plumb weak north of his ears. He can't tell skunks from house cats. His family tree was a shrub. You boys got nothing better to do than to sit out here and insult everybody that goes by. Oh, hi, Sheriff. We didn't see you standing there. Sheriff, we was fixing to have a smoke, but my matches done got wet, and I'll be damned if I can't light one. You know, instead of sitting outside the general store insulting everybody, you could go inside and buy yourself a Hypervape vaporizer. Hypervape is the finest quality made. Why don't you invest in the best? Hypervape.com. That's HYPRVAPE. Hypervape.com.